Hi, and welcome to SparcStart's TA Leader Series, where we have the privilege of talking to some of the folks who are doing interesting things, thinking about interesting things, and generally have good things to think about going forward in your TA management. Today, I'm thrilled to have Jason join us. Jason, can I ask you to introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. I'm Jason Pistulka. I lead TA operations here at HCA Healthcare. We're the largest non-government provider of healthcare in the United States, where we hire over 100,000 people a year.
The numbers are just staggering to me to think of hiring 100,000 people. I understand Amazon and others are doing it in big numbers, but in healthcare, where you have such restrictions on who's qualified and the difficulty of the work that needs to be done, that's really amazing. Given that I know you're not a particularly passionate guy and you don't get riled up about topics, I thought we'd today talk about something that I know you do have a lot of passion about, among other things, which is the whole application process and what employers are doing that throws unnecessary barriers in front of them. What's your feeling on the state of the application process right now?
Yeah, it still amazes me how far behind so many companies are on this front, given that there's so much out there to improve this process. And I'm a fan of analogies, and one of my favorite analogies for so many people's application process, it's the equivalent of bringing your engagement ring on the first date. We're making these processes way too arduous, way too intimate and involved for the applicant, and applicants have even gotten more fickle in this space, since the time of COVID and things of that nature. So people, when they build these application processes, really aren't thinking about what it's like as an end user, what it's like if you're doing this from a mobile phone. And therefore they have a massive amount of applicant drop-off. They paid for the clicks from their advertisement only to have those people never complete.
And in addition to just what are the kinds of things you see people putting in applications that really could wait or should wait?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times what I see is people who are gathering information that they probably need for onboarding, but, again, you're getting a little presumptuous thinking that you're going to go that far. Again, back to the engagement ring at the first date. So it's things like asking for your social security number, asking date of birth. In this day and age with all the fraud and everything else, people are already afraid to give up social security numbers too early.
As well, they should be. Yeah.
Absolutely. And, asking for, your address history and things of that nature. I don't need to know your current address, yet alone your address history, to evaluate you for this job. So as we throw all of those things up, the barrier gets higher and higher for that candidate. They just drop out and go someplace else. We're in the world of easy apply. And if you haven't made your application easy, candidates will find somebody else who does.
And one of the things I find, all employers are talking about the increase in applications at the top of the funnel, driven primarily by AI. It's become much easier to do that. And that's real. And having, a ton of applications that may not be qualified, available, or interested it really hurts efficiency all the way through. But I'm hearing employers hesitant to restructure their application or take barriers out because they don't want more, sort of AI generated unqualified candidates. But those aren't the same two things. Just particularly if you think about your highly qualified candidate, asking for things like social security number and, detail that's really not necessary. I'm not sure that's helping you with fraud, particularly if you've got fraudulent candidates, and that's a thing now. Where do you think that balance comes between being sure that you don't just get 100,000 applications that a bot has filled in with an easy apply, which can happen, and we're hearing stories of, really large numbers, and really making it a good candidate experience? How do you balance that?
Well, I would argue if you ask for your social security number in the application process, 50% of candidates will falsify their social security number anyway because they don't want to give it up. I would. So, if you don't think that a bot is smart enough to come up with a social security number randomly to get you to the interview, because it's not like they're doing anything with that social security number on the front end. If anything, they're bouncing it off their historical employees to see if you've ever worked for us before. But not until after they get to the post-hire process, and they probably ask for it again when you do your authorization check form, which would even be more ironic. So, the bot's going to get past that pretty easily. The things where bots have a bigger challenge with is when you're asking job-specific questions and things like that are harder for a bot to be programmed to. And that's probably a better way to circumvent bots than it is, trying to put in things like a date of birth and a social security number.
Yeah, the sensitive information, not only are employers concerned about fraud, but we're hearing so much fraud from, people posing as recruiters and looking at jobs and doing identity theft. It's very real, and candidates need to be concerned about that. So if you put those things in your application, you're almost encouraging candidates to misrepresent and to lie because they need to protect themselves. So then you get surprised when you've got an application that has all sorts of inaccurate or just false information in
it. And clearly you're not involving your security people in the process, because the security people would say, we don't want to have social security numbers on people unless we hire them. Otherwise, a breach is that much worse. So don't gather that information in the first place. Don't put it in the hands of people that could misuse it within your company. So it's really just a very bad practice amongst many others in the apply process.
And what do you think the bare bones essential information is that people need to gather?
Yeah. Well, so you need enough to get to a legal application. We have people who go to the other end of the spectrum, right, where they just get an expression of interest. It's like an email that maybe has a resume on it. Well, that's horrible too, because now I don't even really have a real application. I can't really even process them through our ATS. So, what we do is we gather enough information on the candidate that we can assess the candidate on paper. So that's not just a resume, but it's also a set of job-specific questions that give us more detail than what your resume may have, because they don't know exactly what we're looking for, and we can't expect the whole world's going to modify the resume for that particular job. And so we gather that kind of information, and we gather obviously required EEOC information and things as needed throughout the apply process. So we're not skimping out on anything like that. We're making sure that we keep legal at bay with all the things that we ask. But the difference between that and some of these others is pretty huge. And there's other things they're doing in these apply processes that are just horrible as well, is the making people verify their email, making people verify their phone number, making people create a username and a password before you can even apply. It's the pain that they throw in front of them is just multiple fold.
Lots of folks will say you should apply for a job at your company every 6 months and just reacquaint yourself with what you're doing and understand how hard that is. And it's really dreadful. What of the applications you get, because if you're hiring 100,000, how many applications are you receiving a year, roughly?
3-ish million.
Oh, wow. And how do you keep a positive candidate experience when you're turning down 2,900,000 people a year?
The world of high volume hiring is very different in that regard, compared to where I've been in the past. So first thing, expectations are lower from candidates in that volume, but probably the most important thing is communication. So one thing we put in a long time ago, it used to be where recruiters had to pick a disposition correspondence to reject somebody, and it wasn't automated. And what lots of recruiters did was just not do it. And so you became a black hole. And when we started forcing that all disposition reasons had a correspondence automatically attached to them, a lot of our recruiters pushed back on it. They said, well, but I might want to use them on another job and everything else. But I can't tell you how many unsolicited emails we got from candidates going, thank you. You know how many places I've applied to that I hear nothing? Just knowing that you're not in consideration. And the reason was because I don't have the qualifications. My comp ask was too high, some level of feedback. is so much better than nothing. And so we've really experienced that, and we've held true to that no matter how much recruiters push back. And frankly, just because you've been rejected from one job does not mean that a candidate automatically assumes it won't be considered for another. So, that's probably the biggest thing that we've done in that process in the high volume world to be able to do that. And you still have people who don't understand because they say, look at all the details and I meet all the qualifications. Yeah, but there's 400 people that applied for that job. 160 met the qualifications, and at the end of the day, we don't talk to all 160. So it's a challenge to maintain that candidate satisfaction in there because we can't communicate to every single person. But we continue to evolve that as we go along.
And we've found that the folks that are doing this well are really big on transparency. It's letting people know how long they might need to wait before they're going to have an answer. The fact that you give a reason why you weren't selected, even if it's a generic bucket, comp, qualifications, whatever, is better than a completely generic same email goes to everyone. So I've got to believe that you get a positive response for that. What are the downsides to that? Because nothing's free in this world, right? Every time you put in a good process, something else has to be amended.
Yeah, there's always going to be anecdotal stuff out there. And when you get that many applications, I don't chase anecdote. But we usually will hear from recruiters if something's off the mark. And we've involved our recruiters in the writing of all of our correspondence. So they've had a say in that front. So it's not a matter of, do as I say and get no input, right? It's do as I say, but get a part in that, right? And I think that's helped a lot because now they've helped craft those messages and approve those messages. And so we have a talent acquisition council that was a part of that process.
That's interesting. How big is your talent acquisition council?
I can't even tell you right now. Last time, 15 or 20 people out of the 400 plus recruiters that we have.
Interesting. And what kinds of things do they do?
It's all kinds of things that we, anytime you're doing change and you're trying to manage change in an organization, you want to get input from the people that are going to be impacted by that change. And so we try to get representatives of the various divisions and everything else. So even within the divisions, it's often that it's not uncommon that in team meetings, they'll say, hey, we're going to have a talent acquisition council meeting. Is there things you would like us to bring up in there and that we can raise up in that forum? And so that's been helpful with a lot of stuff where normally you might reach out and pull some random recruiters in to get some input on a new product idea or anything else. Well, we kind of have that sounding board built in that we've used for a multitude of different things.
Wow, what a great idea. I've heard employers that will tap one or two recruiters because they want to get their input, but actually formalizing it, I've got to believe helps the communication go both ways. Particularly, you've got so much data on the front end. Your frontline recruiters are interacting with so many people. What a valuable resource. Wow. Well, Justine, I would love to hear more about that. I'm sure this conversation could go on for a lot longer. But I'm going to end it here in respect for your time and for our listeners as well. So I appreciate it. I assume if people want to hear more or learn more, they're welcome to reach out to you via LinkedIn or directly. Is that fair?
Yep.
Great.
Send me a LinkedIn connection. I'd be happy to talk to you. And appreciate it.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much. It was nice to talk to you. Goodbye.
All right.